few minutes late. It's been quite a hectic day and the children refusing to go down, etc. But we're here tonight, excited to discuss self-doubt. And I have to watch myself a little bit because having done a post about self-doubt on Saturday with a famous Shakespeare quote from Measure for Measure where he says, "Our doubts are traitors." And then I was all, oh, but we shouldn't be judgy of our self-doubt. You know, we should think of it as our old friend that's helped us along the way and honour it and say, thank you, self-doubt. You've helped me to this point, but now I'll take it from here. So all unjudgy, but then I have to say, when I hear you guys self-doubting, I'm all like, listen, brain, no, they can do it. And it winds me up. So I have to kind of manage my state a little bit around self-doubt. But if you guys are joining me here, please give me a 1 to let us know that you're here. Tim is doing 2 things at once. He is helping me out with Facebook Live and also eating his tea because that's how late our night has gone. So give me a 1 if you're joining me live, or a 2 if you are eating. So welcome, guys. I hope this is going to be some real help to you because self-doubt, I think, is definitely a little devil on the shoulder. It's definitely there for us a lot of the time, and it definitely shows up and goes, just gives a little poke and says, are you sure though, really? Do you really think this new thing that you're trying to do you really think that you can actually do it? No, you can't. You can't. You're worthless. I told you before, you'd never be able to jump off this cliff, and now you've gone and jumped off the cliff, but you can't achieve it. Stop trying to even think you can. I think this particularly comes to the fore in aesthetics because it's a field that most of us are relatively new to, that we don't have colleagues in. You know, we don't have people sort of spotting us the whole time, telling us this is the pathway, that you do this, then do this, then do this, and don't worry if you mess up here, you know, you can come and get help from us. You know, it's not like that. We are lone workers, you know. Obviously we have all of our lovely families and the various Facebook groups, but it can feel quite lonely, and it can, when there is white noise and when there is, when you're by yourself, I think it's easier for the lizard brain to go wild. And I think self-doubt is one of the ways it shows up, the lizard brain shows up the worst possible, in the worst possible way. So we're going to eradicate it tonight. Half an hour, 45 minutes. We're going to come up with some really good, well, I have a 5-step process for how to, I don't think you can ever eradicate self-doubt. Well, in fact, I know you can't, because I've been working on this shit for 2 years almost, and I had a massive self-doubt moment on Saturday. The point is, how do you stop it in its tracks when it does show up? Because I feel strongly that bad states are always going to come to us. Always. We're going to have all the bad states that we've been talking about on these Facebook Lives for however many weeks it is now. They're always going to show up. It's how we deal with them that matters. I've been doing almost like a state change a day recently, and I'm getting so good at it. I can turn it around fairly quickly. So it's about how you do it, and it's about remembering those tactics in those bleak moments. So the first thing I want to say about self-doubt is, I'm not here to tell you guys not to self-doubt. I don't know, you know, you could be trying to go to the moon tomorrow with a rowing boat, you know. I think you should self-doubt yourself if that's your plan. I don't know, it would be disingenuous for me to say otherwise. But what I do know is, and hear me now, I don't know whether you should self-doubt logically, rationally, but I tell you for damn sure the lizard brain doesn't know either. So if you are using your old caveman software, which is your amygdala, the sort of oldest part of your brain, which makes decisions and makes you want to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, which it thinks that you are facing when you're, you know, actually just doing an injection that you've done 500 times before, you know, but suddenly you're worrying about ptosis. I know Ruthie was saying last night that she's got this random new fear that's showing up for her, that she's going to get ptosis all the time, and she knows it's irrational. I don't think she's even had a ptosis, but she's literally like, I'm going to get a ptosis or brow drop. I don't know which one it was, but literally she's thinking that all the time. And I know necrosis, ptosis and necrosis, the evil twins of the complications world, are actually, they are very much something that shows up as a devil on the shoulder when you guys are rocking it, but then you have those moments of self-doubt. So I don't know whether you are going to get a ptosis, I don't know. But I know that the lizard brain is actually just, what is it it when cricketers, what do they do to each other when they're mean to each other and they kind of ride each other? What's that called? It's called like, does anyone know? It's called like ragging or something, or that's what the lizard brain is doing to you. It's trolling you. It's literally like, it knows that you want to achieve these things and you want to thrive, but its motivation is to survive. So even if you really wanted to and weren't that nervous about going on a bungee jump, and then you actually decided to go on it and you were standing on the cliff edge, you've been excited all the way up, but then you're standing on the cliff edge now and you are going on your bungee jump, the lizard brain is still going to show up and be a bit like, tap you on the shoulder. Really? Do you really need to jump off a cliff edge when all we need to do is survive? And that's the point at which you have to decide now whether or not you're going to accept what the lizard brain is saying. Are you just going to roll over and let it decide your life for you? You can actually commit to that tonight. So we'll come back to that in a sec. But I just want to acknowledge, I'm not going to stand here and say, you know, oh God, don't worry, you guys are all 100% competent. You should all be doing, you know, facelifts tomorrow. I don't know whether you are. The point is, neither does the lizard brain. And that's an incredibly important point. You shouldn't accept the lizard brain's first offering, which comes to you in a thought and an emotion. That's something that you can say, you should be able to eventually, when you get state change mastered, you should be able to let that thought kind of waft by and go, oh, there's a thought, oh, classic lizard brain. But it's very hard when you're in the moment. So I think we should dive in, but before we do, I wanted to give you a little bit of an example of self-doubt which happened to me on Saturday, and I overcame it, so this is a good ending to this story. So Tim and I went to a funeral on Friday in Durham, where we grew up, and it was all going really, really well, and that sounds a bit bad, but the funeral, it was for Tim's uncle. He was in his 90s. It was a lovely celebration of his life. You know, I did a cartwheel at the wake. You know, that's the way it was. It was just really good. Like, it was, you know, it was a nice funeral. On Friday evening, though, we went out for some drinks and food with some family and friends, and I had a little, I can't really go into the details, but I had a little chat with someone who is from represents to me like an older part of my life, a time before I started on my personal development journey, a time before, in my perception, I was kind of rocking it and you know, changing my life and living with intention. So I had the chat with this person, and I brought up mindset, and it didn't go well. Anyway, so what I made that mean was, you know, started to kind of sow the seed of doubt in my mind. So then the next morning I wake up in my mum's house. You know, my mum, you know, is incredibly supportive of me and everything. But nevertheless, you are in your mum's, you know, my old teenage bedroom. I'm a bit like, oh God. And after a couple of hours of feeling like I was on someone else's territory and feeling like I was playing by someone else's timetable, and then that thing that happened to me the night before, it all just got a bit much, and the kids were ragging me and whatever. And after a few hours, I found myself with Tim at the car charger in Washington, just literally like, dude, I need a state change, a serious state change. So we got to work, and I asked myself, what am I making it mean? And I shocked myself with how ridiculous the answer was. I was making my time in Durham, which is where I grew up, and it represented before my ascendance as I see it recently, and I was making it mean that everything I've done here to develop the mindset group, to develop myself, you know, all of that stuff, to become a better leader, all of that stuff was just a bubble and not really real. So basically, I was feeling out of control, I was feeling powerless, and I was making it mean that this thing that I'm developing here was all just not really real, and it was just a bubble, and it could just be popped really easily, because the true me is the person who I was as a child and growing up in Durham. So I told Tim this after we'd asked ourselves that question, what am I making it mean? And Tim was like, okay, basically laughed in my face, which was really useful, because he was like, yeah, no, I think that might just be your lizard brain talking. I was like, oh, okay. And it seems to me to such bullshit now, but at the time I was really feeling it. So I asked myself, what am I making it mean? I changed my focus, and I also, interestingly, was able to say, what does it really mean? And then I was able to, oh no, I'm not wearing it because I changed this dress. But the beautiful bracelets that Alison Evans bought me, one of the Mindset Warriors, which says, I am my rescuer. I was able to touch that and say, no, I am this is real. This stuff I've been doing is real. It's not just a fabric of my imagination. So anyway, I was able to change my state really, really well. So the self-doubt just went. And that's what I'd like to teach you tonight. Okay, we're going to do it in a slightly different way to how I did it on Saturday. So the first thing you need to do, Tim, I don't know whether you want to, something you want to say at that point. I might bring you in later. I'm going to bring Tim in later to discuss how to overcome self-doubt when injecting, like literally, like you've got a needle in your hand, how to overcome self-doubt. Do you want to talk about that now or later?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I can do.
Okay.
Hi everyone. I didn't say hello at the beginning because I was trying to get some food in the place because it's been one of those days. So there's a couple of things that went through my mind. You'll hear me come back to this again and again. When people don't understand the whole picture or they have an element of fear, they quite often go to the worst possible conclusion first. And if you think about someone with health anxiety or even just mild anxiety over everything tracks to the worst fear all the time. And I think a lot of self-doubt is about feeling uncertain and then trying to explain why you feel uncertain, and for some reason your lizard brain takes you straight to the worst fear, which is that you're not cut out for this. Yeah. So there's this continuous tracking to what the worst outcome would be. So the first thing I'd say is understand what self-doubt is. It's a sense of uncertainty that then your brain tries to figure out, and it looks for what the worst outcome could be about this uncertainty, and for some reason it throws that into the mix. And that kind of algorithm might work well when you hear a noise in your cave 10,000 years ago, and you think what's the worst outcome? It could be a saber-toothed tiger. That's probably quite a good thing to think in those days, but now we're living in a world where that just isn't the case. But your brain is still this old piece of machinery that goes, what's the worst thing this could mean? It means I'm useless and I can't do anything, which means stay still, don't do it, keep yourself safe, you're not cut out for this, stay in your cave. So the first thing to realize about self-doubt is for 95% of people who are watching this, it maybe hopefully 100%, but I just don't know how many people are watching and how good their skills are. There's always that mixture of, is your brain telling you something that you need to know, or is it just making up a story to keep you from taking any risk, which is what your lizard brain's doing. So understand it first. And then the next thing is, in terms of self-doubt when you're injecting, the biggest thing I can say is stop. And this is a big problem with medics, because a lot of us are honed and we have that identity of the intelligent one or the hard-working one or whatever it is that you do. And so you get a lot of validation that way, and it becomes your thing that you're competent. So as soon as you start something new, especially if it's been a long time, you suddenly think, well, maybe I am competent. It's been my identity for so long, but why is this not feeling easy? It's because I'm not cut out for it. Yeah. So try and understand that and put yourself, because I think we forget. And I've been reflecting as I was listening to this to how I felt as a junior doctor walking around on the ward, and just how horribly out of depth you feel in those first few weeks, and everything that happens, you think, when they call, I know that if there are any doctors or dentists watching and they suddenly use the term doctor before your name, and you're like, who? Me? So that's how you feel with every interaction. You're thinking, I don't know if I can do this, it all feels so difficult, but for some reason you forget that. You start to walk this new walk, you suddenly think, oh, I can do this, this is actually pretty easy, or pretty routine. And then you go into this new field of aesthetics and you start again, but you've forgotten what it's like to do something for the first time. And so your brain, in that moment of uncertainty, immediately goes, it's because you're not cut out for it. So be aware of that process. We seem to go through it again and again and again and never remember that this is just part of the process. So first thing is, self-doubt is part of the process. I've had it with injecting. I had a really horrible week, probably how much it must have been, about 8 years ago. So 2 years into it, and I just had 2 or 3 things go wrong. I had a really unsupportive colleague at that time as well, who just didn't want to help me, just was almost enjoying watching me suffer. That's how I felt anyway. So that was my worst moment of self-doubt, because I kept thinking, like, is there something I'm doing wrong? Looking back, it was just like buses. Sometimes bad things come in 3. Just like buses, and it actually was nothing to do with my overall ability to inject and create good results and look after people, but I had to go through that. So first thing is, know that it's part of the process. Interrogate your skills by all means, but never think that because you feel that way don't let that become the definition of you, because that is pure lizard brain stuff saying you're fine as you are, why take this risk, stay put. And what you do, you miss out on everything that's good in terms of growth. So finally, I know a lot of people talk about complications as a bit related to the panic one, but trust the process. I remember this also as a junior doctor, that you're given these facts, but although you've learnt about them intellectually, they don't have an emotional resonance to them. Looking at an ECG where there's no changes, and maybe the history sounds a bit more like gastroesophageal reflux and there's nothing, but you still have that doubt of like, can I really send them home, because what if? And that's what self-doubt is. It's a question mark, and as long as there's a question mark you don't answer, you might get stuck. So you've got to start to draw an emotional connection with the stuff that you're doing in your consultation, your treatment, your injection strategy, your aspirating, your checking the capillary refill afterwards, and literally tick them off saying, I've done every single step that I've been taught to do, and say to yourself, this means I've covered all my bases. There is no one on this planet who can do this better, because I've checked everything, I've done everything right. And see, if you don't have an answer for your question mark, you're going to go away going and panicking. So trust the process, trust the examination, make an emotional connection with the fact that you're doing everything right, with the fact that therefore you must be safe, because this ultimately is about your safety to your lizard brain. And then hopefully the self-doubt will linger, but it's part of the process. To feel self-doubt, become aware of do the process and trust the process. I'm talking about two different processes here, which is slightly confusing. But the process of injecting safely, and then the process of becoming proficient and losing your self-doubt, those two different processes, basically trust both of them. This is part of the process, and don't let a moment of panic or just a big bruise or something like that stop you. All of these things happen along the way. Keep learning, but remember that that's part of the process.
Lovely.
Okay.
I remember when you were a junior doctor and you used to go every 4 months, you used to like rotate into a new rotation, and then you just used to be like, oh my god, nice. Completely back up to square one. So thanks, Tim, that was incredibly useful, because as Jill said, it's very relatable to, I think, the moments that hit you guys most in terms of self-doubt. It usually, I imagine, is clinical, but I imagine you guys get a lot of it with regards to this whole story about like, I'm not a business person. I've heard that so many times in different ways. So you've been in the NHS for 20 years, you're rocking it. Of course you still have your moments, and I'm sure you still have self-doubt when you become promoted, etc. But ultimately you're still in this team, you're on this track, and then suddenly from nowhere you do a course, and then you're a business person, an entrepreneur. Joking, I've never even heard that word before. And it's like, I think at that point the imposter syndrome starts to kick in. You start to doubt yourself and think, really, me? When there are all these competitors, what makes me so special? What's going to make people turn up to see me? And that, of course, is pure lizard brain. So here's my 5-step process for overcoming it. And Tim's just done particularly one of the steps, which is incredibly important. I think will really resonate with you guys, because, especially from your medical background. So the first step is, I think, despite what I said on Saturday about the Shakespeare quote and the fact that we shouldn't really judge self-doubt, I do think there's an element of actually saying, no, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm not going to stay on this kind of messed up cycle where it's like highs and lows and highs and lows. And of course, entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, and it's never going to not be a roller coaster, and the highs are beautiful. Same with personal development, it's a complete roller coaster. But I don't think we need to be defined by the roller coaster. I think we need to kind of enjoy the ride and just say, oh god, there's the lizard brain again, shut up lizard brain, or woohoo, I am amazing, and totally rock it and feel that and celebrate that, rocking it when you have done a great treatment. But don't allow yourself to be driven. You have to fucking drive this shit. I've told this story once before, but I think about it regularly. Tim said I was doing this at the Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within seminar. My nana at her funeral, I read out the Dylan Thomas poem, "Do not go gentle into that dark night. Rage against the dying of the light." And when my dad told me that I was going to be reading this, Tim and I were a bit confused, because it's quite an almost aggressive poem, and my nana was like completely not aggressive. But what we realised after a while is, after thinking about it, she did have that fucking fight in her, She was emotionally abused as a child, and she actually turned her life around, and she's only ever gave love and care to those people in her care, strangers, you know, my dad, my auntie, everyone, and we've all benefited from that love. But she raged. You know, she didn't just take it lying down. We've got to some extent, well, to all extent, we've got to say, Lizard Brain, I've been running your patterns for 35 years, but now it's time for me to take control. And you can do that now, guys, because you aren't in self-doubt right now. You aren't in panic right now. I want you to hold your hand up and say, I am committed to not being driven by the lizard brain self-doubt. I am going to do everything I can to rage against the dying of that light, because it's not okay. It's not okay for us to be on this hideous roller coaster the whole time, state change, or state. And actually, I think it's okay if you're changing your state, but if you're staying there, if you go into a bad state and it stays with you for 3 days, that's not okay. And it's gonna vomit out onto your children. It's gonna go out into your partner and start affecting your colleagues. And, you know, I hope you guys don't think I'm getting a bit mad here, but I really think that sometimes you just have to bludgeon your way through things and start with the energy and commit. So I hope you're with me. So give me a whoop, one of those kind of like emojis if you're up for it, if you're up for raging against the self-doubt lizard brain. You have to have that energy. Tim, have we got any, or some kind of like, yeah, whoop.
The pressure's on, guys.
Now ever, because on a Wednesday night I turned off my bin pillow. Right, guys, I want to see if you've got some more emojis. Who is committing to raging against this lizard brain for to overcome self-doubt and actually putting some energy behind not letting it overrun you? Come on, guys. Come on, you're not going to break through unless you actually commit. I promise you, because in that moment when it strikes you down, when you're midway through an injection or something like that, the self-doubt, you need as much energy as you can, as much emotional energy to remind you that this isn't okay, and to actually motivate you to do the state change in that moment. Come on. Okay, guys. Well, I'll teach you the rest of the lecture, but if you're not committed, then I think you possibly need to ask yourself some questions, because it takes a lot of willpower to push through this particular problem. So I'll just leave that with you. Maybe we'll get some number 2 fist commission people committing over the next few days. So the first thing is, I think you need to commit. The second thing is that you need to acknowledge that you're in self-doubt. So I didn't really think of myself on Saturday as being in self-doubt, but when I asked myself the question, what am I making it mean? I realised that it was self-doubt. I think that's incredibly important, or else you can't move beyond it. And also, if you have the strength, if you have committed, you need to, once the self-doubt thought kind of floats over your head, or, you know, you suddenly feel it and you feel that emotion, you have to sort of almost kind of say, oh yeah, that's self-doubt. Oh, it's that classic lizard brain self-doubt. And I think at that point, you can go back to what Tim said, which is about almost acknowledging that it is part of a process, the learning process. So trust the process. Remember, the first process you are trusting is that this self-doubt is just a normal part of the learning journey. And the second process then, the third step, is that you have to actually think to yourself, and you can actually do this in a mantra-like state, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process, trust the tick box. Because I once heard this amazing documentary, I think it was, about how pilots and anaesthetists have literally a check box. I'm sure you guys, some of you are aware of this. I particularly was interested by the pilot example. They literally have like a tick box, like have I, you know, turned this light on? Have I switched this button on? And it fascinated me, because it almost seems a bit rudimentary, you know, that you would have, as a pilot, a highfalutin pilot, you would have to do this tick box. But actually, of course, it's incredibly powerful, because what they found is it did reduce crash rates and increased safety, because human beings need tick boxes. We need boundaries, we need structure, we need processes, and it makes us feel safe, and it makes the lizard brain feel safe. When Tim had his occlusion the other day, he literally, I mean, I don't think he was doing any of this kind of mantra because he's not really in self-doubt, but he did say to himself, right, what do I do now? Like, remind myself, what is the protocol? And he just fell back on the protocol and implemented it. Bob's your uncle. And it made him feel safe. And if his lizard brain was going off, I don't know whether it was, his lizard brain was able just to then go back to the tick box. So trust the process that you are in self-doubt, and it's a normal part of learning, as Tim said. It doesn't mean that you are fundamentally flawed. It's a normal part of learning. And then from there, trust the process of your learning. What do you how do you implement this thing that you're trying to do that you're having self-doubt with? If it's marketing, you're doing the selfie challenge or whatever, go back to my selfie challenge post on the mindset group and just have a look at the steps. Download a YouTube video or something like that that describes the marketing tactic that you're trying to implement. Just trust the process. If you're doing personal development, I often think to myself, trust Tony. I'm obsessed with Tony Robbins. I literally just think to myself, he's been doing this for decades. What has he said that I recommend that I should do? Trust that process. Go through it. Force your way through it. Commit to changing your state around self-doubt. So once you have trusted the process, I think it's really, really important, and that should, in that moment, allow you to have enough energy to get past the almost the panic state of like, oh, I can't do this, the self-doubt. It means that you should be able to force your way through that just by defaulting to your procedure, to the process, to go back to your training manual or whatever that you need to refer to. But I think it's really, really important when it comes to self-doubt to actually, as the next part of the process, to know your triggers. Okay, so what triggers you into self-doubt in the first place? Because it's incredibly powerful, because if you know your triggers, then there's two things that can come from that. The first is that you can actually try and avoid those things that have triggered you in the first place. So for example, the thing that triggered me on Saturday was going to Durham. Like, I'm not going to stop going to Durham, that's where my family is, but I am going to be more mindful and aware that that's something that's a danger for me, that it might make me make a certain meaning out of the situation. It might make me feel powerless. That I have other triggers when it comes to self-doubt. So for example, Dawn Henderson mentioned a really, really good one yesterday, which is that she feels self-confident and does not doubt herself when she's in uniform. So this is fascinating to me, because it's classic lizard brain to actually almost be quite obedient to those kind of things like uniform or where you are, your environment. I know Tim always wants to, he's always very keen that he injects in his room in the clinic because it's his environment. He feels powerful there. And it's incredibly important. The lizard brain really understands routine, it understands boundaries, it understands those things which you have drilled into it over time. It really responds to those kind of, oh right, okay, that piece of music is playing, right, that means that I am, powerful. So you need to know your triggers. You need to avoid powerless states. For example, on a Saturday morning, I've been quite clear about this on my Insta a few times. Saturday morning, I have a bit of a danger that I will stay in my dressing gown for too long, and then I will be late for my son Jasper's drama class, and it really sends me downhill, because it means to me that I'm a bad mum, that I was out of control, that I'm not, I'm not running my day very well. So it's a trigger for me. And it literally sends me into self-doubt. I'm like, oh God, like maybe I'm a bad mum or whatever. So you need to know your triggers and avoid them like the plague, and really rage through that. I've had to actually force myself to go. I never go downstairs now on a Saturday morning in my dressing gown. I just have, I go straight from my shower so that I put my makeup on and I feel powerful. It's like part of my armory. And then once you also know your triggers, of course, you can create a new power place. So this is a really good tool that I've been using a few times recently. I think I might have mentioned it. So you need to, and you can think about this ahead of time, you need to develop your power place. It's a bit like your power move, you know, your power pose, or your persona that we talked about quite a few weeks ago. You know, we developed, like, I have my queen persona, then we have Lady Di, Alice, which is Nicola, Alison has, Beyonce. There's a few kind of personas that people have created, and those things are like your power place. But I've developed a power place recently that I've given quite a lot of thought to. So it's actually not a physical place, but it's almost like a zone that I go to when I'm feeling powerless. So the other day, I was feeling powerless in a situation. I thought to myself, right, how am I going to feel powerful again? I'm going to go to my power place. And at the moment, I actually have one of my power places is that I feel powerful when I'm doing social media, like really doing it proactively. I don't just mean reactively kind of answering questions and whatever. I mean actively doing like an Instagram live or an Insta story or whatever, or a Facebook live. That's where at the moment I'm feeling quite powerful, because I feel like I'm impacting the world. So I literally, the other day I was walking away from school, dropping Jasper off, and I felt a little bit powerless. And I thought to myself, right, so I immediately got my phone out and started going to my power place. So guys, and I did an Insta story or whatever. So you guys need to think to yourself, where do I feel powerful? What have I overcome in the past? When have you raged through a situation, whether it be in your dentistry or whatever it might be, where you've actually proved yourself and you feel proud that you overcame that barrier? So think to yourself, what makes you feel powerful now, and when have you proved yourself in the past? When have you actually overcome the self-doubt lizard brain? So then, if you are, for example, injecting and you suddenly think, oh God, I'm going to do an occlusion, or oh God, I'm going to do, you know, a ptosis or whatever, the procedure for how to overcome this is trust the process. Think to yourself, oh God, this is just self-doubt. It's classic lizard brain. I'm just part of a learning journey. Now trust the process in terms of your actual procedure. So just think to yourself, right, did I check my safety margins? Did I inject at the right angle, etc., etc.? Answer those questions, and then you will have, as Tim says, ticked all your boxes, and you will be as close as you can be to sure that you've done the right thing and that you there's no need to be self-doubting. Then, because you know that, let's say, for example, at the moment, one of your triggers is that you, like Ruthie said, she's worried about doing ptosis. So let's say that that's one of your triggers at the moment. You know, obviously we'll want to try and work on that. We don't want that to be forever. But if you know that's going to be a problem for you, you might say, well, before you go for it, do injecting, literally get a tick box out, a tick list out, so you can see it, have it up in front of you maybe, or kind of hidden around the corner or something, so that you can check it. That's a trigger for you. So make sure that you're going to overcome the trigger beforehand by having the process easily accessible for you. Or it may be that you need to, as Dawn says, you need to get into your uniform and do a power pose before, whatever. Remind yourself of your powerful persona. Make sure that you are aware of and use your triggers to your advantage. Okay, so now let's say that you're feeling a bit of self-doubt. Let's say that you've done all your safety margins and everything, but afterwards you're focusing on obsessively, like, oh God, I think I've probably done like the wrong thing, and now they're going to get a drop. So you're focusing on the wrong thing. At that point, you need to remember your state change triad, which is what you focus on, your feel. So change your focus. At the moment, I'm listening to an amazing audiobook by Gary Vee. And if I ever go down and feel a little bit down, I just change my focus and listen to that audiobook, because I find it incredibly empowering and inspiring. So maybe come back to a Facebook Live or go to a favorite YouTube video or whatever. Get into that powerful place. Do something that makes you feel powerful. It could be passive, it could be you actually doing something like social media or whatever, like for me. But get back into your power place and make sure that then you set up your life so that you aren't tripping over your triggers. And next time you are going to get into less self-doubt in the first place. So, my little 5-step process, I hope that's been of some help. Just trying to think of anything else that people said last night. Oh yeah, there's an interesting point that that Jane made, which is that self-doubt is quite different to confidence, because she feels like a confident injector, but then suddenly self-doubt will come upon her when she's about to do a cheek injection or whatever, based on something that happened to her recently with she had a positive aspirate, and then I think that's kind of making her self-doubt. Tim, is there anything you want to say about the anxiety loop and about focusing on, you know, particular, if you're almost like obsessing over a particular fear that you have around, for example, a positive aspirate?
Well, for me, anxiety is always about an unhealthy focus on something that is dangerous that you can't control. So it is that kind of, but what if I'm wrong? And maybe that aspiration that was negative really wasn't an artery. Like, there's just no way to know these things. You've got to recognize the futile cycle and then try and plug it with something else. So and then you're no longer in a cycle of just asking questions that make you more and more scared and more doubt yourself. So I mean, this is just more relating it, moving away from complications to straightforward self-doubt, which is that question of maybe I'm not cut out for this. Now, there is possible that the answer is yes, but much more often in our experience that's just a moment of uncertainty where you're saying maybe I'm not cut out for this. So you could plug that loop with maybe this is just learning. So I'm just learning. So on the end of maybe I'm not cut out with it, or you could just say, well, maybe I'm just learning, because actually that's what it is for 99% of people who come up with this problem. And you wouldn't believe the people who have it. I mean, think of any famous injector or anyone you look up to, and they've all had it at various points that maybe I'm not cut out for this, because it's just part of the process. So try and plug it with something else, which is maybe I'm just learning, because that's what it is for most people in the first few years.
Love it. Right, guys, I hope that's been helpful to you. And remember, when you have that self-doubt, lizard brain reaction, remember, to some extent, you have to rage against it. You don't want your life to be controlled by this. It's not okay. So if it's been of some use to you guys, drop me a thumbs up, and please invite your medical aesthetics colleagues to come and join the group, because I think we're creating a beautiful tribe here where we can all support each other in our moments of self-doubt, which inevitably will come. Also, follow me at Heartfelt Hustler on Instagram, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Let me know what you're interested in hearing about, and we can do a Facebook Live moulded around your desires. All right then, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.